Hello, I'm Dr. Karen Shackelford, and this presentation is how to do a literature search. So there is a term, literature review, and it really refers to two separate but related ideas. A literature review, and I reference the APA manual here for descriptions. A literature review is a type of article. So in psychology, you can publish a literature review. It's a detailed Um, just what the title suggests. It's a review of the literature. The literature is published peer-reviewed articles in psychology. The focus in this review on theory and on evidence. Evidence comes from data of peer-reviewed empirical articles. A literature review is also the term that's used for a part of an introduction to an empirical article. So empirical article is a fancy way of saying a science article where data was collected. Empirical means evidence, so it's a research article with research evidence. Inside the introduction to that article, which is one of the major sections of an APA style paper, you review the literature. You're not just reviewing it like this happened, that happened, here are some papers. So when you're an undergrad student, you might just do a literature review in which you talk about some studies in a general area, and your professor is probably fine with you just reviewing any articles on that topic. When you're a professional, when you're a psychologist, when you're a researcher, you're actually making an argument with those articles. And so this literature, we're going to talk about literature searches, searching for the literature and finding the precise articles you want to cite, and then crafting an argument around those citations. Those are all the things you're doing. So it's a series of complex tasks that are happening together. In this presentation, I'm going to use an example from my entertainment psychology research lab, who is working on a paper that has to do with music and nostalgia. So I'm going to be sharing with you the things that grad students and faculty in that group are actually doing right now. It's another way of saying this thing that we're teaching you to do, it's a professional activity. And like I said, with the undergrads, it can range on one side to just finding some psychology articles and sort of summarizing them, to on the whole other end of the spectrum, you're a psychologist, a professional, and it's your job to write up your research, and therefore you're going to need to make an argument, and you have to do this process to make that argument, to know what the literature says. Now, the literature means, like I said, published empirical articles, published research articles, and the theories inside those articles. So this paper that we're working on in the laboratory is about the psychology of nostalgia. So before I go forward, I'll say a little definition of nostalgia. Nostalgia is an emotion. So we're talking about an emotional experience, and it's a positive leaning experience. And probably most often it has to do with something that happened in a person's personal past, but it could also be feelings that are evoked by an era. Like, for example, there's a Minions movie in which Gru, the main character, goes back to his uh, childhood, and that was set in the 1970s. So a person might have feelings of nostalgia, which are longing for another time, another situation, even if they haven't actually been to the 70s. It can evoke a feeling. I've never been to the 1950s. I have been to the 70s, but I haven't been to the 50s, and yet I could still feel nostalgic about the 50s based on watching Happy Days or seeing plays or looking at photos that were taken in the 50s and getting an idea about that. So it's sort of a longing for the past. It's a mixed emotional feeling. Probably giving you too much information on this, but you do have to understand the key concepts, also known as variables, in this literature. So one, whatever literature you're doing. So one variable here is nostalgia, this feeling of bittersweet longing. It's bittersweet, but it leans sweet. It's most often perceived as a positive experience, a feeling that you would want to have. So let's say that we're writing an article about music, and when you listen to certain music, it might make you feel nostalgic. Then in this review of the literature, whether I was writing a whole paper that was just a literature review, or whether I was writing a journal article with an introduction that includes a lit review, I'm telling the story of that body of scientific knowledge that's already been published on this subject. You don't want to ignore all work that other people have done and just tell your own thoughts on the subject. You're required in psychology to tell what has been published in this area. So I've gone over some of these bullets here. A piece of advice from Wendy Belcher is the impetus for that last bullet here. Never write anything that your reader doesn't need to know for your proposed study / for your argument. There are many interesting things we could say about nostalgia. Wendy Belcher, in her book, Writing Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks, says the reader should understand it with each sentence and each paragraph and each page why they're reading that information. Sometimes in papers that I read in lots of different grad courses that I teach, people will bring up a topic and they'll be talking along and then they'll say something like, Albert Bandura's theory of social learning, and there'll be a heading social learning theory, and I'll think, okay, why am I reading? Why am I reading about social learning theory? We want to use transitions, we want to use thesis sentences. We can't just name topics, like social learning theory or what have you, and throw them out there. We want to only include things we need to include for this argument, even though there's many interesting things about our topic, and we want the reader to know why we're raising these things. Like I said, in an early undergrad paper, your teacher knows that that's what you're doing, and it's good enough to just have taken 3 articles on that subject and written it up. When you're a graduate student, or then when you're working as a professional, you have to do more. You have to be more astute with your argument. So in the readings for the Research Skills Seminar on Literature Reviews, Mackey and McAvoy talk about being a scholar has certain perspectives and certain dispositions, so points of view and personalities or ways of being. So there are some intellectual or cognitive dispositions as a scholar and as a person writing this paper that we're talking about. What is natural to happen here is that the person comes into it inquisitive. We're curious about what's happening here. Why would a song make you feel nostalgia? And what would that mean? We're skeptical. Is that really true? What's the evidence for this? We work on our own, even though ultimately we work in teams. We're each doing our own intellectual journey and taking our own actions to get this paper published. And we're being honest, we're not trying to hide anything. We're trying to share alternative perspectives. In this process, you have to be persistent. I think persistence is perhaps the number one quality that supports your success as a scholar. You're smart, you can do good work, but you will be asked to be persistent. You will be told no, doors will close, and you're going to be asked to pick that ball up again over and over again. I'm mixing a bunch of metaphors here, but the idea is it's so important to be persistent. You may write one draft and you may get feedback on that and think, oh, well, that draft was a waste. It's not really a waste. Everything you do prepares you for the next thing that you're working on. And that leads to the fact that you need to be super patient. You might think, so I'm a professor and I got my PhD in 1997 and I've been teaching psychology since the 90s. And you might think, well, I'm no longer patient and I don't have to be as persistent. No, sorry. It's always, I am all of these things. And I need to be all of those things in order to have a chance because it's a very competitive field full of very smart people. And so I think of it, I'm going to use the word natural loosely. I'm naturally these things, and I chose this field because it's such a good fit. And so I'm fortunate that they come relatively easily still. Is it always easy to be patient with rejections? No. Is it easy to be patient when people don't understand something you've been working on for a long time? No, it's not easy, but you need so much patience. Deliberative, I have a quote about that here. And then collegial, you work in teams and you work with other people as you try to get your research published. So I like this quote, so I pulled it out. I'm calling them M&M, the authors of the book. There's a lot of order that comes into this. There's a lot of focus, and your limitations will always sort of be handed to you as you do this process. So whether you're writing a paper here for a research skills seminar, whether you're listening to this video for another reason, you're writing a literature review. So just understand this thing you're doing right now will call on you to be inquisitive, independent, honest. It'll call on you to be persistent and patient, deliberative and collegial. I think I skipped skeptical over there. You know, they're all involved and more. They recognize their own limitations and try to correct their discrepancies. That's what scientists do. Being a scientist will hand you your limitations all the time, no matter if you're overall very good at what you do, you're always being shown your growing edges. So that's true in grad school. That's true as a professional. It's always true. I have a mentor who is fantastically successful. He's always, he gets rejected. He has to make arguments. He has to revisit things. He has to rewrite things. It will push you forward. I often think it's must be similar to being a professional athlete, in that there are days that you will feel like you're starting over again. There'll be times you have an injury. There'll be times that you're set off track. And then you have to deal with the fact that if you're good at being an athlete, or if you're good at being a psychologist or a scholar, you will be challenged because you'll be with a lot of other good people, a lot of people who are good at baseball or psychology. So there will be pieces to correct. Every baseball pitcher, every psychologist, every researcher has natural limitations, and they also have experiential limitations. In grad school, you're learning things, and so you just haven't experienced them yet. And so there's a lot of acceptance that comes with this, and patience. And you could, with any piece of science, you could continually improve it. It's done only in the sense that if you finally get it published, it's printed, or if you finally turn in the paper and pass the class, it's done. But that thing could always be improved. So you also have to know that this is a very complex process, and even though there's always room for improvement, that doesn't mean that what you did wasn't good enough. Oftentimes that's something I think you need to know in grad school. If you're passing your classes and your professors are saying, okay, you're ready for the next step, and the next step, you are doing that. Keep in mind, even if you've only seen the corrections or the suggestions on your work, keep in mind when you are making progress, that means you're doing a very complex thing. So in this, back to the details of the process of the lit review, when you start to do the searching, the library searches or the online searches, or however you're doing them, of the literature, you've got to narrow your topic. So we started out with the idea of the psychology of nostalgia, and then that's just one piece of it. Normally in psychology, we have at least two things that we have to mention, and I'm going to kind of gloss over some exceptions to the rule, but I'm going to say an independent variable and a dependent variable here. So when you're making statements, you have to look for both. That's really important. It seems like very, very simple, but it is easy to forget. So I'm looking at here, I'll tell you the details. I'm looking at what happens when people feel nostalgia. So nostalgia is one thing, but then there are some outcomes of that, independent variables and dependent variables. And I need to do my literature search, that's why I'm talking about it here, with both types of variables in mind. So think in terms of your variables, write down a list of your variables. So for example, what we're working on in the entertainment psychology laboratory right now is this idea that listening to music that triggers nostalgia in you will result in you feeling greater self-continuity. So I phrase that in terms of my research participants. They select songs that they think will um, make them feel the feels. And when they listen to those songs, we will measure whether they have a greater sense of self-continuity. I'll tell you about what that is as we move along here. So I'm mapping out the theory. Music, the hearing of the music leads to the feeling of nostalgia, leads to the increased sense in continuity. And this is not hypothesis yet. I'm trying to isolate the variables here. So let me tell you some more about self-continuity. Let's take an example from this study. This study that I'm talking about is actually a study where we use television theme songs, very popular television theme songs, to induce nostalgia in our participants. Let me give an example. We used a Rolling Stone list of the top 25 greatest theme songs of all time, TV theme songs. And one of the top ones was, let's see, I'm going to try to pick one that makes sense here. Well, I'll just go with one of the top two. One of them was the theme to Gilligan's Island. By the way, our participants in this study had to be at least 30, preferably 40, really, because we're using an era of broadcast television where people watch TV as families, where the access to these shows was a completely different thing than it is now when we have streaming. But let's use me as an example. So I was a kid when there were reruns of Gilligan's Island, and so I know the Gilligan's Island theme very well. I've watched, I don't know, most of or all of Gilligan's Island. And so if I were going about my day, and let's say I walked into a room and I heard the theme to Gilligan's Island, that would make me feel nostalgic, positive leaning, maybe a little bit bittersweet, longing for the past. And that would lead me to a sense of self-continuity. Now, the theory here is, and I'll have the citations in a future slide here. The theory is that when I hear that song, the theme to Gilligan's Island, it takes me back in time to my actual childhood in which I watched that show and just was aware of the theme song. It made the top of the Rolling Stone list because it's it's a very well-known and much talked about song, kind of like the Brady Bunch, which is also on this list. It's a song that if you sang to a certain age group of people, that would probably make them smile or laugh and go through memories of their childhood, how they watched it, who they watched it with, what it made them feel. So here, when I talk about adjacent literatures, what I'm saying on the last point in this slide is just that you want to be aware of where you are in the whole scheme of things. So I'm focusing on music that evokes nostalgic feelings, and I'm focusing on certain outcomes like self-continuity. Self-continuity, the sense that myself is continuous. I existed, there was a little Karen as a child, now I'm an adult Karen, and I am the same person. In fact, I'm the same person who watched that show, and little did I know that I would be I would become a psychologist and do a research project on this thing, which is fun. So there's a good thing to reflect on. See, I'm having nostalgia and it's making me have a sense of self-continuity. Oh my goodness, am I in a study? Okay, so social connectedness is another factor. I put it here as an adjacent literature. By that, I mean, there are there are things that are directly in line with maybe a hypothesis that you're moving toward or directly in line with an argument you're making. And then there are things that are sort of I like to say, take a step to the left, take a step to the right. So how about research on nostalgia and other media? That would not be central to your discussion in a paper about TV theme songs and nostalgia. Music in general and nostalgia would be more central, but there may be a particular study that you would cite with another medium like video games for a reason. I'll leave it at that at this point. So when we start the search, we say, what is my subject? And I've gone through these steps with us already. I won't rehash them. What are my best search terms? My best search terms are the things that I'm going to put into the library window of search terms. They are the names of your variables. And so what you're trying to do is find out how published researchers refer to these phenomenon that you're talking about. Now, sometimes it's incredibly straightforward. With nostalgia, actually, that word is, I'm just going to say the right word. Like that's what you will find if you're looking for it. You'll find the word nostalgia. In other literatures, it's not always that way. Actually, there's some little dark corners in this literature in which that is actually what they were studying and they didn't use the word, but that's going too far afield. Mostly, we're talking about nostalgia, and everyone agrees. The process of doing this search is always iterative. In other words, you do it, you do some other things, you come back, you do it again, you do some other things, you come back, you do it again. It's always ongoing. Same thing with the writing. Everything is a work in progress where you reiterate, you go back and you do more, you edit, you change. So it's a series of circles that you'll draw and redraw. Okay, wait a minute. I got to do another literature search on nostalgia and self-continuity. I got to go back. Did I miss anything? Wait a minute. I now know there's another search term. I got to figure that out. It's a fluid process. And Mackey and McAvoy talk about scanning, skimming, and mapping. Ooh, this is all a tongue twister. Mackey and McAvoy, scanning, skimming, and mapping? Wow, that's a lot. So what are these different things? I'm going to go through and just define scanning, skimming, and mapping, but I want to give you some advice here that there's, as I mentioned, there's a type of APA style article that is called a literature review. The whole thing is a literature review. See APA manual. If you can find a literature review article in your general field that has already been published, that is like gold. You want to hang on to that. So I'm citing some of these golden articles here, Setikides et al. 2022 and Setikides and Wildshoot 2016. Those are two literature reviews on music and nostalgia, not TV themes, but music and nostalgia. One of them is called 50 Years of Research in Music and Nostalgia. So they tell you that nostalgia, these articles are also theoretical articles, meaning the theory, if you're getting caught up on how do I use theory or what is theory, theory is really about why. So why would music induce nostalgia? Why would music bring you back to a period or make you feel a longing for something that you are not currently experiencing? Put a pin in that. I have another slide. I'll get back to that. But the research, the theory is cited in these articles. It's if you get those articles and go inside, you will see the theory there. And it says that nostalgia, if you're feeling nostalgia, there are three types of positive outcomes that have been repeatedly demonstrated in the literature. Some are related to the self, like feelings of self-continuity. Some are related to social things, like feeling socially connected. For example, I remember my brother and sister watching Gilligan's Island with me, and I feel connected to them. I feel that was a social activity. And then existential meaning that the feeling of nostalgia taps into my sense that my life has meaning. So even with something like a comedy television show, it can make me feel some things that are existential feelings because it can make me think I was a kid and I had a brother and sister and we watched Gilligan's Island together, and family is important to me and loving my brother and sister is a meaningful part of my life. And the way I grew up was a positive, environment and that sort of stuff. So even thinking of something like a comedy TV show can sort of give me the warm fuzzies because I will think things like that's the way I was raised and that was important. Family are important. Laughing together is important, that sort of thing. Whether I articulate this is not what I'm getting into right now. Um, I'm getting wonky because I'm the psychologist, but anyone, when you play that song for them, the theme song, and they smile or they laugh or they share stories, they're feeling some of these things that it matters to them because that's a pathway back to something that, for instance, warms their heart, makes them feel like life is worth living, existential stuff. So I've gone over some of the variables. The word variable is very important here. Again, sometimes when you search, the word that you will use, like nostalgia, is pretty clear. Sometimes it's garbled and it's not so clear in there are multiple ways of referencing it. Sometimes you get unlucky and the word you're using is the right word, but it overlaps with other literatures. For instance, in media psychology, we have the term identification. Identification is the term. Cohen 2000 is the key first paper. It means that you're seeing a story through the character's eyes, you're identifying with them. But of course, the word identification has so many other meanings, and so you will find tens of thousands of papers on that kind of identification. So that makes it harder. So we're joining the conversation when we do a lit review because you are experiencing other people's research, you're reading it, you're understanding it, and then you are noting it in your own work. So we have the topic, we've talked about the names of the variables. Your job is to become the expert at what research has been done so far. Again, this can lead from a small junior like example of this in college to you're writing your own research papers and publishing them or writing books. So what's been done so far, and can you make some relevant, helpful, maybe astute comments about that literature? You open up the portal like the library and you will eavesdrop on all the conversations that have been going on. Maybe this is your first time you've ever searched for psychology of nostalgia and music. And it's like you're opening a window and listening to a conversation with scientists that happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago, more years ago. And so that conversation took place when it took place, and you're accessing it now. Like you turn on a television and access a show you've never seen, or like you walk into a museum and see a beautiful work of art, could have been constructed in 1890, but you are looking at it now. So you're opening the window, you're hearing the conversation. So the authors, I'll call them M&M, have suggested scanning, skimming, and mapping. So step one is scan. Start with the search terms, put them in the library's search engine like Fast Search, and then scan, read quickly through the titles and the abstracts. And from that process, you get rid of some, you skip it, you don't mark it, or you mark it, put a checkbox, send yourself the bibliography, and you can, from that, figure out what are your potential candidates. In this case, I mean, if you're writing the professional paper, let's say, or a classroom paper, what do I think I need to talk about for this particular project? What is the most germane or relevant? Um, I suggest, and I'll continue to drop little hints about this throughout, that when you're organizing, one way to do that is to make tables of the content with the name of the authors, name of the article, the year, the variables, things like that. And spoiler alert, I will say that I'm going to suggest using AI for this, but you don't have to. You can use your own self, use your own brain, or you can use AI. It's a good thing for using AI for what it's good for. Okay, skimming. Okay, so you've put the search terms in, you hit go, you're looking down the list, then you've selected these candidates, these ones that you think you might want to hang on to because they're highly relevant. So you're reading the abstracts and the titles, going back and searching some more. You're looking for the names of your variables in there, both the independent and the dependent. So both, in this case, the music and these outcomes like self-continuity. It could be adjacent, like I was saying, take a step to the left, step to the right. I've named 3 types of variables. You could also say that all of those things fall under the category of well-being. So I would snag anything that had to do with nostalgia and well-being myself. And that comes from reading that literature, understanding it, talking about it, planning studies, and realizing that what we're saying is nostalgia can be beneficial in different ways, can be psychologically healthy. Okay, I think I've covered all of that. So you're skimming and you're selecting and you're organizing, you're keeping notes, you're keeping information organized. Actually, I'm going to go back. Let's see, one here. There we go. Just to hold before you have to see all that information. I wanted to say before we move on to this, you're taking notes, detailed notes that include the things I've been talking about, your independent and dependent variables, your theories, your main findings. This is something that AI can create for you, and I have some instructions on that as we go forward here. But you're deciding what you need to write about, given what your argument is. It'll be a smaller thing or a more general thing in a student paper, and it'll be a really targeted thing if you're writing either a literature review or an empirical paper. Okay, so back forward here. So some big questions that guide you when you're scanning, skimming, etc. Again, we're going back to what are the ideas we're interested in? We're interested in this idea that when a piece of music sparks nostalgia, it leads to these benefits. There are social benefits, self-related benefits, and existential benefits. I mentioned theory. Now I'm going to unpack this a little bit more. Theories can perplex graduate students and other people, including moi. You know, being a psychologist, being a researcher is always challenging. It's always pushing wherever your growing edges are. And we all always have growing edges. We have not mastered this because it's incredibly complex. And just in case you thought you mastered it, then you submit your papers and people will tell you what's wrong with your work. But ultimately, you get published, and that's just the nature of the beast. Everybody hears about the flaws in their work, and everybody has to revise. It's not just me. I'm not paranoid. Okay, so what is a theory, and why would you mention a theory in your intro? Why do you have to mention a theory in your literature review and not just necessarily one? People ask me all the time, by the way, how many theories do I need to cite? There's not a thing like, okay, it needs to be 3 or something like that. It's what theory do you need to understand why something is happening? So if that's 1, that's great. If it's 2, that's great. It's probably not 8, let's say, but it's a couple, maybe. It depends on what you're trying to explain. So if I'm saying, hey, everybody, I'm writing this to the world, hey, everybody, in my paper, you know what? Music sparks feelings of nostalgia. Not all music, but some music will probably spark in you some feelings of nostalgia. And when it does, it has been shown by this and that and the other research, which I now review, to lead to these 3 types of benefits: social, self, and existential / meaning benefits. So the theory is the why. So why is it that if I am going about my life and I suddenly hear the Gilligan's Island theme, that it will induce nostalgia? Okay, because that one's pretty straightforward, I think. If it reminds you of something from your past or something from our collective past, something that is, when I say past, I mean it is distant from you right now. Like you are not in it right now. So the theme songs, we are picking participants who are of a certain age because of all the songs we offer them in our methodology 25 songs, and they select the songs that they think will induce feelings in them. And then we played the songs for them and we asked them if it induced nostalgia and how much. So why, if I've had you select a song that you think will cause some feelings in you, why does it cause those feelings? It's because of this idea that when something connects us to something that we are now distant from, something that had some meaning, something that was familiar, like a theme song of a television show, that it also is personally emotional, that it personally reminds me of my childhood or the 70s or my siblings or it could be a combination of these things that is taking me back. So let me get out of the realm of media and say, let's say you went to a family gathering and someone brought a dish that you used to eat in family gatherings as a child, Aunt Sally's peach pie or whatever. Then that pie, if you haven't seen it for a while and you're seeing it there, you might smile and say, "Oh, the pie, like Aunt Sally's famous pie. Oh, I'm feeling the feels here. I'm feeling the nostalgia, the distance from me and those earlier events. And I'm feeling a positive leaning, a little bit bittersweet because that's over, but mostly a warm, fuzzy feeling. So it's that way, it's a bridge across time. That's the why. It's a bridge across um, where you are and where something else is that you can't get to. So even though I haven't been alive in the 50s, if I turned on Happy Days, I might feel nostalgic now. Let's put aside the fact that I did watch Happy Days in the 70s. That's one track that you can understand. Another track is, though I haven't been to the 50s, I have been built up, something in my mind has been built up about what it was in a nostalgic way, the things that people did. My parents went to high school in the 50s, and so I can remember my dad telling me about the haircuts, the men's haircuts in the 50s, or my mom telling me about the poodle skirts and the saddle shoes. If you don't know what these things are, don't worry about it. The point is, things that existed in the 50s that my mom and dad told me about. Okay, so I wasn't there, but I believe them. And so things from the 50s might make you feel some sense of nostalgia, even if you weren't there personally. There's still like that bridge between here I am now and the 50s existed, the 1950s, and I'm not able to go there, but I could go to, oh gosh, I saw an ad for a Disney resort in which they had diners and such. So they're kind of trying to evoke that sense of nostalgia, even with little kids who haven't been to the 50s, but you can make something from an era and it can make you feel that longing to have been there, perhaps through a sense that that time was more simple, even if it wasn't. Okay. In these theory papers, you also explain why your variables are connected. So it's all about the why. Why do I feel nostalgia? Why does that feeling make me feel a sense of self-continuity? Because I'm reminding myself that this person who sits before you hasn't always been this version, that there was a virgin. I need to, okay, let's just pretend I've taken that little Freudian slip out of this video to see if you're awake. Virgins. What is she talking about? Oh, this is evoking memories of a Monty Python film with virgins. Anyway, I was supposed to say versions. Sorry, versions. Woo, where has this talk gone? Versions of yourself in the past. Okay, I need to not say anything else about that. Okay, so there were other versions of me. For example, the version that sat in my pajamas on the sofa with my brother and sister and watched television. Okay, so that's the why. That's the why, the feel. Where is the feeling coming from? The feeling is coming from that idea that that was a more innocent time, the idea that kids in their jammies and watching TV together and laughing, singing, the theme songs, what have you. It points over time. Like, for example, the Gilligan's Island theme song, because it's a part of pop culture, I can remember different memories where people would sing it. I once went on a faculty retreat, not at Fielding, but another university, where someone was singing other famous songs to the tune of the Gilligan's Island theme song, like ad nauseum. Like, so because it's a piece of pop culture, it might remind me of multiple things over time. Okay, try to be better behaved for the rest of this talk. Okay, so what's the evidence that these variables are connected? What you're doing is citing evidence. So you're saying these authors found that in this scenario where people listen to music, they felt an enhanced sense of self-continuity. They were reminded that they are continuous, that they have a history, that, you know, and that they're continuing. So the last of those three skimming, scanning, mapping thingies are mapping. I probably would have used other language for this. No one asked me, it's their book, but I probably would have said that when you're looking at these research articles, you're doing deep reading and you're taking notes. You're sorting and labeling, organizing and storing. I used to do this with a pen and paper or a pencil and paper. So back in the day, I would print out a research article and read it when I was in grad school, and I would flip it over, it would be stapled, and I would write on the back, like, I'm noting that this is an experiment, for instance. Why? Because experimental evidence is a particular kind of evidence. If I had evidence that one thing causes another thing, I would know that this study was something I could reference. I could describe the study and cite it and say, how do I know that nostalgia leads to increased self-continuity? Because this was an experiment that demonstrated that. So that's the pencil and paper version. You could do a digital version where you use a reference management software like Mendeley, Zotero, or EndNote. Zotero is available in our library. It is free. And so for organization, you might make folders and say, these are all the studies I have about music and nostalgia, for instance. You could do subfolders that made it more specific. These are the ones that have self-continuity as the outcome. You could make your own APA style table or non-APA style table for your own research use. But it is a great thing for those of us who have done the pencil and paper method and other types of methods to be able to use research tools like AI to help us organize. So there are research tools like Scite, SCITE, that's an academic research tool that helps you find literature. Of course, there's Google searches. There are other academic research AI tools. And there's the standard ones like ChatGPT that you can use for some of these things. So I have done the following. Take a set of research articles. So I'm reading, let's say I'm reading 10 articles on music evoked nostalgia. I open up ChatGPT, I explain that I'm doing this type of research, and I give ChatGPT 10 articles, and I say, can you generate an APA style table in which you list the authors, the year of publication, the independent and dependent variables, and a statement of the findings? And if you drop that in there and give ChatGPT just a couple minutes, it will make this whole chart for you. I'm in awe of this because I've had to spend most of my career doing that manually in some way, making my own table in a Word document or what have you, and then picking out each of the terms and, you know, doing this stuff. When you have these tables or whatever version you might do that might make sense to you, I like a table. You can look back and say, wait, okay, now I need to make the argument that music leads to nostalgia, leads to self-continuity. What papers have demonstrated that? And I could have a whole list of just those papers. Then I could have a whole list of just the ones that had social connectedness as the outcome. I could mix it up and have them take a bunch of articles and say, okay, which of these were experiments? Which of these were correlational? Which of these were qualitative? I could make a table for each of those types of things. I could have all of these, and it would help me sort through and be sure which articles were what kind of evidence. So I need some experimental evidence that X is related to Y, and it's just in my chart. How did I do that? How did anyone do that before make your own tables, before AI? Well, I think we mostly just held it in our heads. We just said, all right, let me think of all the articles I know in which they use self-continuity as an outcome. Well, that's what people do, but it's so much more, what's the word? The quality will be so much higher if you have either yourself put together this table or other, it could be a bulleted list, it's whatever you like, to have it there to draw up every time, not to have to try to remember from scratch the names of the authors, exactly which version of the variable they used, et cetera, et cetera. So in my mind, for research, and I'm not talking about writing your paper for you, but for doing things like just taking articles and making making organized documents, tables, what have you, there's like no, it's almost, you're doing yourself such a huge favor if you do this. If you happen to be someone who've never played with AI, I encourage you to do it. Give it a try. Use the trial version and maybe subscribe, pay for the pro version of whatever software you're using. Ask a friend who's done it. Ask me if I'm your professor, have a meeting, like just show me how you use ChatGPT to make a table or something like that. I'm happy to do that. I'm sure also you can go on YouTube and just search for ChatGPT scientific research tables or table generation. I'm sure that'll be on there. And it's easier than you think, I believe. Okay, so the advantage of the reference software like Zotero is you can do things like tag them, label them, sort them, share them with other people. So a research group can all have access to the same PDFs and the same notes. It creates your reference. The reason you use, one of the primary reasons you use software like Zotero is it spawns your reference section for you. You don't have to type it in yourself. There are limitations, like it can make errors, like putting the title in all caps or something. So I'm just reviewing here on this slide. You start with the goal. What are you making the case for? When you know what you're making the case for, like this variable leads to this variable, you need to search for those two variable names, and you need to understand why those two things are related. That's theory. And you're doing all of this simultaneously as you put terms in, find articles, skim through those, then decide which ones to throw away, which ones to keep, then scan through those, then take notes on them, then start to write from there. And don't forget the step of having AI write you some tables, which will save you so much headache. So we know in this literature review, you're looking for evidence. You can cite who has provided evidence for these relationships. You can also look through your whole set of tables and find out what hasn't been done. So when we did this as a research team, we found out that there was a lot of work published on music evoke nostalgia and these positive outcomes, but nothing that we can find at all on television themes, which is a nice intersection between studying television and studying music. It's kind of studying both. And it's important to know how this works so that you can make predictions in the future, that I can know if that's a song that's going to make me feel nostalgic, here are some benefits that I might get from that. And that is all I have to say about the literature review. Hope that was helpful. And if you're in a class for this, you can write me and ask me any questions about it. There will be a transcript and the audio. Have a great day. Bye.